Good evening, welcome. You're watching Big Fight. I'm Vishnu Shom. Today's been a day when there have been a lot of protests over the Agnipath recruitment scheme. There's been violence in so many parts of the country. Arson. There have been reports of trains. In fact, dozens of trains have been attacked. Railway property has been attacked. The homes of MLAs have been attacked. BJP party offices have been attacked. And a lot more. It appears that what began as a recruitment program in the armed forces has now turned out into a massive law and order concern, a massive law and order problem across the country. Now, the government has introduced a couple of changes last night to the Agnipath scheme. One of them allows candidates up to the age of 23 on a one-off basis, but that will come back to 21 as an upper age limit. Remember, the Agnipath scheme is dramatically new. It basically means that those who join the Indian Armed Forces will now join for a period of 4 years as opposed to 15 years, which has been the case in the past. When they leave at the end of 4 years, they'll be given a one-off payment of approximately 11 lakh rupees as opposed to a pension for life, which is what present soldiers have. Now, it is a bit complicated. The government is sure that there would be about 25% of all of these Agniveers who remain in service for that full period of 25 years, a full period, I beg your pardon, of 15 years. Why? To ensure that there is a balance of seniority and experience and youth as well. But today the big concern was the violence that we've seen across the country. But if you have questions on Agnipath, what exactly it's all about, whether as a scheme it really works, we've got this fantastic panel of some of the finest people who believe in the scheme and those who say that it will never work in India. We've got a fantastic panel, and these are some of the finest minds in the Indian Armed Forces. They're all retired, but also a lot of people who have expressed very strong views on this. General Yash Moore with us, General B.S. Dhanoa, General S.L. Narasimhan, Rear Admiral Sudarshan Shikhande with us as well, and we'll be joined by other panelists later on this program. What we'd like to do in this part of the program is what we call the first punch, where I'd invite all our viewers in a period of 1 minute to introduce their views, whether they agree or they disagree with the scheme. It's their choice. I'll start with General Yash Moore. General, your time starts now. You have 1 minute for your first punch. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, Vishnu, at the outset, I have two major issues with this scheme. First of all, the scheme does not talk about what happens to the youth who have been waiting to get recruited in last 2.5 years. What was their fault? Especially people who had just to get a joining letter and join various training establishment in Air Force, Army and the Navy. So something must be said about them. That is where the anguish is coming from. Second part is this scheme leaves the young people who aspire to join the defense forces for a permanent career. It changes the socio-economic dynamics of their family and their surroundings. This 4 years period leaves them with the insecurity hanging over their head. And with 75, all of them getting demobilized or left out of the army, what happens to them? Who are the 25% who will be taken back? This may raise a lot of legal issues of nepotism and other things, and it will create huge HR issues for the military, which is going to manage this. So these are the two issues I think which need to be addressed first.
All right. General Narasimhan, your first punch. Go ahead, sir.
This is a different kind of a scheme which has been in the works for some time. I think the armed forces also have been considered for the last 2 years. And this is a scheme which has come basically to give various advantages. I'm not going into them. My point is this, that we need to give this a try before we condemn it. That is number one. Mm-hmm. The rest of the things can be discussed in the later part of the thing. I feel that we will get a younger profile and a more technically and more modernly qualified people into the army, and then that is likely to benefit the army in future. That is the way I feel about it. We should give it a chance for it to be tried, and if there is any thing to be tweaked, we can always tweak it as we go along.
General B.S. Dhanoa, your views, sir, your first punch, and your time starts now, sir. Go ahead.
There's a quote by a famous American baseball coach, I think Yogi Berra, where he says that the future ain't what it's supposed to be. So I'll start from there, because the army that you are trying to model today with the new scheme of recruitment and also the Air Force and Navy, the armed forces, are going to meet the challenges 4 years, 5 years, 10 years down the line. So we've taken only a part of that reform, and that is on the HR side, by saying that from now on, the only recruitment is going to be through an untested but a radical change in the way that we have so far looked at getting in the kind of motivated soldiers, sailors and airmen that we need for the three forces. There are definitely issues with the scheme. I would also go along to say that the period for the 4 years for the tour of duty is too short. We need to take a relook at that.
Okay.
And we also need to take a look at the retention that we have said 25%. Will it be adequate? These are two issues that I feel that we
All
need
right, sir, your time ends there for your first punch. We'll, of course, start the debate soon. But Rear Admiral Sudarshan Shikhande, your first punch, sir. Your time starts now. Please go ahead. 1 minute.
I would say that a very tight correlation seems to have been, coming out in the media of the types of entries, the way armed forces are organized, and whether it's a winning or a losing proposition. I can add here that the historical evidence is very mixed about what works in the armed forces, because it's a whole lot of aspects at the national strategic, the political, military strategic, and or levels of war, and the military, operational and tactical levels of warfare. So there are so many ponderables, so many variables that to pin future effectiveness or ineffectiveness on a change scheme perhaps is a bit dicey. And we should be careful about making these before the fact inferences, because most armed forces are organized differently. They have different models, and yet some with long-term service have performed well in war. Sometimes they have not. Conscript or draft militaries have also performed well, sometimes badly, or in the same war performed differently, either better or worse as time goes on. So the evidence is mixed, and I don't think we should emphasize the certain ineffectiveness of this method or this type of organization under the Agnipath scheme that seems to be doing its rounds.
All right, Admiral, thanks for that. General Yashmore, let me come to you first. People who were wanting to get into, for example, the army for the last few years couldn't because of COVID. Now they're too old, and now there is Agnipath. Is the resentment we are now seeing on the ground in many states linked to that?
Yes, exactly. That is the biggest resentment, that there is no word at all. There is no empathy in this entire thing. You can't play with lives of young people. This is young India. We say we have a youth bulge, we have a youth dividend. You keep them in lurch for a year plus. I have met students today who had cleared the Air Force, all exams, everything done for about a year back, and they were just waiting to join the various streams of the Indian Air Force. And each soldier takes 1 to 2 years to get into the forces. Today, joining as a soldier or an airman or a sailor is not what happened 30 years back. Today, it is as competitive as becoming an officer. I don't know, why don't we start looking at soldiers with more empathy and understand which kind of a socio-economic background do they come from. So what happens to them? They have not studied, they were just waiting to join, and now they have been left on the road without any assurance to them. So this is, I think, the main reason. And the other thing I see, Vishnu, is the scheme has come up in a hush-hush manner. There were kind of an eerie silence around this scheme between the service headquarters, MOD. 1 year plus, they have been moving up and down, deliberating on it. Not a word out to the nation at large. Why couldn't somebody tell these people, don't wait now, we are bringing tour of duty? Why did it come in this fashion? So this has left some kind of a doubt in the minds of young people, and that is why this is kind of an agitation and this kind of anguish that you see in the streets of rural India today.
Okay. General Narasimhan, would you like to take a part of that? He's made two key points over here. Firstly, there is anger on the roads because a lot of people who wanted to join couldn't join. And secondly, it's being done, or it has been done, in a hush-hush manner.
I'll take on both these questions. I think the first point, what General Moore is making is valid, in the sense if somebody has passed the exam, is waiting to join the armed forces and is being denied, then yes, there will be some kind of an anguish that needs to be addressed and should be taken care of. The other point regarding the hush-hush affair is concerned, I think these things have been under discussion for a very long time, at least for 2 years as we know it. that it has been discussed between various service headquarters and the Ministry of Defense and the other agencies of the government. So I don't think there is anything that has been kept hush-hush. The only thing is it was not made public to the public till the time things could be crystallized and brought to some kind of a implementable stage. I don't think that would have been even possible to put it outside, because there will be thousands of views. Even after this has been done, you find how many views are coming up. With all those thousands of views coming up, it would have been very difficult to implement anything at all. So I think the discussion was taking place, and in any case, we are all the retired community. The people who have to handle this particular issue are the people who are in service today. They were in consultation with the Ministry of Defense and the Ministry of the other ministries that are involved. So I think we will leave it to their wisdom and say that, okay, this is what they have decided, and those are the people who are going to face the brunt of this.
Okay, all right.
Whether 4 years or otherwise.
General Dhano, is that answer satisfactory, that there are specialists who are in service, in uniform, dealing with this? Everything cannot be discussed with the public at large before a scheme is announced.
Well, I respect the views of General Narasimhan. He's been my commandant at the Army War College. I was there as a directing staff. But having said that, I would say that there are certain times when you need to take the public into confidence. And therefore, what General Yashmore says is absolutely right, that if it affects the future of the youth of this nation, then shouldn't somebody at least have, at some level, consulted them? Now, how much of the consultation is something that you can take into account into a policy that is pan-India is a moot question. And at the same time, what is the collective wisdom of the people who are there in service? There was somebody who, like us, we've left the uniform about 3, 4, 5 years ago. But at the same time, there are certain issues on which there are certain valuable inputs that can be provided by people who have experience. To say that it can be left entirely to the wisdom of those in service, at the same time, your service rules and conditions also bind you to be very circumspect in what you say when you know that a certain decision is likely to go in a given way by the by the government.
Sure.
Those kind of restrictions are not so much on the retired community. We need to be supportive of those who serve. We need to be supportive of the military leadership. But at the same time, if there are pitfalls and there are certain changes that need to be made to path-breaking reform, I will say again, this is path-breaking reform. But at the same time, can it be done in a better manner? I definitely feel so.
Admiral Srikhande, how would you respond to those who say that, why would I join for 4 years when I can get a full career in the paramilitary forces?
Yes, there could be competition for talent between what might opt for the competitions for joining the paramilitaries as opposed to the service. That's a possibility. We'll have to figure out how to still have the kind of talent pool that applies for these. One of the reasons that could be in favor of this is because of the early recruitment and the fact that in many cases, once they leave after 4 years, they might still be eligible on a competitive basis to join paramilitaries, or if actually the commitments that are being talked about of offering them lateral induction into the paramilitary forces is done in the manner that is now being voiced. So both these, I think there could be something for them more concrete that might happen, both in terms of age as well as in terms of lateral induction. Okay. I also want to say that the aspect of employment generation, etc., is very important. Economic well-being of the country is very important, and yet at any time, if you take that the total strength of the armed forces, people in uniform, is about 1.5 million. They would take a few 100,000 here or there. It is still 0.1% of the India's population at about 1,350 or 1,400 million people. So either way, it's a 0.1%.
Okay.
We should not overplay the employment or lack of employment that could happen because of the armed forces or because of the railways or whatever it is.
Let me just go.
General environment is to improve.
I want to go across to General Yashmore. Sir, is that something that you accept, that, or do you share that view that it wouldn't necessarily impact people leaving after 4 years?
No, there's going to be huge impact on their lives. In a country where permanent job, a government job or any permanency gives you so much of mental peace, and your entire future career depends on this. Vishnu, in this scheme, one major thing has taken place. We have made military a less attractive career. Today, anybody who is physically fit, tall, very good, first choice will be paramilitary forces. Second choice will be state police. And he will come for this tour of duty only as a third and last choice. What have we done? Military was always attracted the best talent among the youth. So now, in one stroke, you ensure your military gets, people who have not been selected in the paramilitary forces. This, I think, people will realize it after some time, but I see this is a paradigm shift in the value of the military, in the the kind of respect and regard the youth got when they joined the military forces. So there I see why didn't this scheme be applied for paramilitary forces or tried in some state police? Why is it being tried in the military? So I think this is a major default I see in this scheme.
General Narasimhan, why tinker with something which worked? Recruitment in the armed forces has always worked. We have lots of problems in the armed forces, but not the process of recruitment, the process of working in a certain regiment, the process of, all sorts of things. And it was being opened up to women. The short service commission was being changed. It was being fixed. Why meddle with that?
It is not a question of meddling, Vishnu. It is a question of actually trying to change with the times. You need to keep this in mind. You see, the wars that we fought 20 years ago in Kargil and other things are not the kind of wars we fight today. Their wars have changed. Their character has changed. Nature may remain the same, but character has changed. So you need a changed kind of an outlook towards handling matters military over a period of time. That is point number one. Point number two is, Yash has got a point in saying that, okay, he'll be rejected after 4 years, etc. I'm not very sure that still we will not be able to attract the best talent. We'll still be able to, because the pool is very large. You will be able to attract a good amount of talent into the armed forces even for 4 years. And there is always a question which comes up as to what will they do after 4 years. They'll go and find themselves on the street. But please understand this. We are recruiting 45,000 people in a year. If you look at the total youth population in that age group of 17.5 to 21, that is going to be many hundreds of times more in India. So we are only looking at this pool of 45,000 people. And they are also going to go away with a Seva Nidhi of about 10 to 12 lakhs, which a guy with 20 to 24 years of age is not likely to see otherwise if he has not joined the army. So he has got some kind of a backing which he can work further to improve himself if it is required. That is one way of looking at it. Second way is, of course, the side schemes that have come up. The states have announced that they will be able to give priority to these people, etc. Those will depend on how they are implemented. That we'll have to wait and see. Even now, I am saying this is a change that has been brought up. We need to allow it to work, and if it doesn't work, then yes, let us tweak it or let us adjust it the way it will be the best in the best interest of the armed forces and the individuals who are joining the army.
General Dharwa, it is a fact that the Home Ministry has said that there would be priority given for recruitment in paramilitary forces. Number one, state governments, for example, the UP Chief Minister has said that they'd welcome Agniveers into the police force. The government has also said that they're going to work towards educating Agniveers once they leave. There'd be credits which they earn, which can go towards 50% of credits in IGNOU. The remaining 50% would come from courses that they select. So those who choose to be more educated can become more educated. Is that something which works for you as something which might make this more acceptable?
Vishnu, with all due respect to our politicians, and they are great leaders, but anything that a politician promises, I would take with a large cup of salt. Having said that, I would also like to say that, we are putting so much of emphasis on this, what he's likely to do after leaving 4 years of service to the Indian military. Is that what we should be focusing on? Should the military not be focusing on issues of how do we make the best use of this individual? Why so much of emphasis in that program, which was there, the press release and the press briefing, on what are his talents and his various skill sets going to be after 4 years? I think we've got it wrong there. We need to be sure that the guy we're getting in firstly is the best. And I agree with the point Yashmod made that you may not have the best of the talent pool available to you for various reasons. And he's, actually given out quite a few logical ones. Secondly, we should be making sure that the guy is available for those 4 years. Are you going to be putting him through Chinese language course? Or are you going to be putting him through, IGNU training in those 4 days? Or are you going to be putting him on the border? We got to be sure as to what we're going to do with him. And let those skill sets and everything else be a part and parcel of what he's going to do afterwards. Let the others decide. Let the CAPF, if they are willing to induct him, train him through all those various things that he has to. The severance package and all is very good, but eventually it is job security that the youth is looking at. And he's not going to get it in 4 years.
Admiral, in fact, let me come across to General Moore on this. General Yashmore, what about the regimental system which is defined? It is the identity of all of you in the army. It is the identity in a sense of the Indian Armed Forces. Even the Navy is affiliated with a certain regiment on their warships and things like that. So the regiment is so important. So I in fact tweeted out something earlier and I wanted to know if you could answer. The Gurkha regiment is such an intrinsic part of the heart of the Indian Armed Forces. They are Nepalese, but they work in our country, they add to our country, they fight for our constitution, and why would they want to leave after 4 years? Where do they go after that? So what happens to that fine regiment?
Vishnu, before we come to the regimental part, I'll answer that. But one thing before we, start singing praises of the scheme, if it was that good, why wasn't it brought for officers? When we inducted women officers for short service, they all went to courts to get permanent commission. Even today, short service commission is the last resort. When a young man has or a woman has finished everything, can't go to NDA, Naval Academy, Air Force Academy, over age, finally, chalo, let's go to OTA. So short service commission for officers have failed. This scheme was initially thought for officers. Why wasn't it introduced for the officers? Why only for Jawans? So therefore, this scheme has not worked. So I don't see how, if it didn't work for officers who are educated, who could go and do an MBA, go to corporate and find a second career, how will it work for Jawans who come from rural area? So that is one point we must keep in mind. Now coming to regimental system, I think regimental system traditions are keep moving. I belong to an all India, all class regiment, and I've seen with change of time, these systems also change. For Nepalese, we have been promising them we will not cut down their quota. I don't. That was when we were recruiting 60,000 soldiers. But now in 45,000, I don't think we should be looking at Nepalese citizens coming to India. First, let's give job to our boys. So 45,000, if you give 5,000 to the Nepalese, then what happens to our citizens? This angle we'll have to factor and really look at Gurkhas as a regiment from Nepal, or do we want to get our boys? An issue which we can be debated sometimes later.
All right, we've got an audience of a lot of young people, men and women. Would you like to come in, raise your hand, and I'll ask you to sort of state your question.
My name is Malay Pandey. My question is how the Agnipath scheme should be looked upon. Is it beneficiary to the unemployed youth who can get a chance to serve the armed forces, or is it a policy that has a motivational start followed by a tragic end?
Motivational start followed by a tragic end. General Narasimhan? Or in fact, let me ask Admiral Shikhande that question. Admiral, you want to take that? Motivational start, tragic end. That's the worry.
I don't know if we can make these inferences about motivation, because the history of warfare, again, as I'm saying, shows that it is a big variable, and various types of armed forces organized have been motivated even as draftees or conscripts. So I'm not too sure whether we can make these inferences about motivation. However, I do agree with with what General Moore was mentioning. Is that we need to give priorities to recruits from India, and whatever it is from Nepal can also be handled. And the regimental system is the tradition of soldiering should not necessarily be conflated with effectiveness at soldiering. So from family to family, but the sentiment is important. But we should not exaggerate the implications, and every person should be treated as an individual.
Got it. Let's bring in some more questions. Let's have that multi-box over there. Can you raise your hand? Yes, in the second row, you've got your hand up. I think you're wearing a... Go ahead, yes.
Yes. Good evening, everyone. My first question is that I think Agniveer is a temporary skill
development function for sustainable solution for our unemployment needs. But what if in the long run, all those people who are partly employed, I think it is a partly employmentship for government of India. But although it's also secured the national internal security as well as external security. We know that there is a Maoist activity is going on, and nowadays India is a country
What is your question?
65%.
Give me a
My
sharp
question is that it is a temporary solution or a permanent solution.
All right. Is this who wants to take that question? Let me, General Narasimhan, is this a temporary solution, or is this going to be permanent? That's in fact a great question. What happens 20 years later? I mean, what?
There are two things I want to come in on. One is from this, whether it is an employment scheme or whether please understand, employment is fine, but I think we are looking at motivated people who want to serve at least for some time in the armed forces. That would actually motivate them to join for 4 years, get those kind of skills, etc., that they need to have, come out of shyness. You see a difference between a trained soldier and a person on the civil street. You have a difference. So that difference is what makes him better when he goes out of the armed forces. That is number one. Second thing is this scheme is likely to be a long-term one. I don't think it is a short-term one or a temporary one that is being discussed or being decided upon. It is going to be a long-term one, and how we stabilize it, my understanding is it will take at least 8 years to stabilize this. Two tenures of 4 years each have to pass through for us to actually analyze and come to some kind of stabilizing this in some form.
Sure.
So it is going to be a long-term one. We need to be prepared for the long haul.
Yeah, I just want to add one thing to what the General said.
Go ahead, sir.
And this is again, and I've been saying it, that professional militaries are not in the business of running employment schemes. Let's make that very clear. Professional militaries need men, women, airmen, soldiers and sailors who are motivated. And whether you get them in the kind of scheme that you rolled out, we will get to know, like the General has said, at the end of a 4 and an 8 year cycle. There are apprehensions. Some of these may be very misplaced. Yes, Admiral Shrikant is right that the history of past warfare is no indicator as to which kind of entry does the best. So we just have to wait and see.
Any questions from a number of women on this?
One issue.
Yes, go ahead, sir. Go ahead, yes.
Yeah, one issue I want to say is about 4 years. You know, all our life we considered everybody who was under 5 years in the unit as young soldiers. It takes minimum, I'm saying you, why we kept 5 years as young soldiers is, it takes minimum 5 years of time for a soldier to establish himself in the unit. 6-7 years is when he gets his first stripe and he can be, given some kind of a responsibility. It is only when he gets a second stripe, when he becomes 10 years of service depending on the regiment, is when he becomes a non-commissioned officer. Then he becomes a genuine soldier. Then he starts identifying a Meri unit, my company, this is my task, and you can put 10 people under him on a post in Dras. When you go on line of control, when you go on Siachen, other places, there are 7 to 8 soldiers under an NCO on an isolated post. If 50% of your unit after some time is going to be with Agniveers, what is going to happen? Who are going to be these NCOs? And 4 years out of which 1 year is leave, 6 months is training, 2.5 years ke andar, can you really become a soldier fit to go back to the street and carry the ethos of this army?
Okay, General Narasimhan, would you like to respond to that?
For me, really 4 years is too less.
Both of you have been right out there on the front line. Answer that specific question.
See, even today, if you look at the organizational structure in an infantry battalion, look at the section, look at the platoon, look at the company level organizations. Even what you're saying is right, because the promotions take place that much of time. But if you look at the grassroots level kind of organization, you find the same kind of 25-75. 75% of the soldiers today are below 5 years of service, even in sections and platoons and companies. So that argument that, only trained soldiers can be there in the forward areas, etc., that experience of the Havaldar as well as the Nayak, who's actually the section commander or the platoon Havaldar, those are the guys who pass on that tradition, pass on that experience to the youngsters. That is why they are co-located with them. So that is how they will build up this. So I don't think that we should take it too seriously of this. My point again is this. This is a scheme that has come. 4 years has been thought of. I talked about many other countries where the recruitments are. Taiwan, which is facing China every day, is thinking of reducing the conscription to 4 months.
Okay.
I don't know what they will do in 4 months. We
All
are,
right.
we are now worried about 4 years on the line.
All
So,
right. Okay.
Yeah,
we're
just
going to
give
get-
it a try.
A quick point on that. I think in this whole business, one thing we had agreed upon that in this 4 years, you may not get the optimum output that you need from a soldier. Please look at increasing it. That's a sincere request, and I'm sure it will be conveyed to the people that matter.
All right. At this stage, I need to take a short break. We'll be back with the big fight in just a few minutes from now. Do stay tuned. Welcome back. We're looking at the scheme called Agnipath. It is one of the most radical reforms ever in the history of the Indian Armed Forces, perhaps the most radical one ever, but it's resulted in a great deal of protests, a fair amount of confusion on what happens after recruits who work in the armed forces for 4 years go after that. Joining us at this stage, Wing Commander Anuma Acharya. She's a former Indian Air Force officer, also with the Congress Party at this stage. Commander KP Sanjeev Kumar, he's a former naval aviator and experimental test pilot. Colonel Ajay Shukla joins us at this stage, and Brigadier Anil Gupta, who's with the BJP, joins us. He's also obviously served in the armed forces. Thank you all very much for being with us. Commander Sanjeev Kumar, there is a suggestion that after 4 years, youngsters will be recruited. Do you agree?
After 4 years, youngsters will be recruited, as in you're talking about the retention factor of 25%?
No, that they'll be recruited, 75% will leave the force and would be recruited elsewhere. Do you believe that that's something that's realistically achievable?
I don't believe that at all, for a couple of reasons. Because they're joining at a very young age, 17 and a half to 21 years of age. In all likelihood, they would be just past 12th standard. During those 4 years, 1 year approximately will be consumed in training, and the rest of the 3 years they will be employed for the lowermost rung of the spectrum duties on board a ship. Because on a ship, I talk for the Navy, they would not be employable for anything other than the very basic tasks. Right. So when they leave at the end of 4 years, at the age of, let's say, 21 to 25, they've possibly not done their graduation. They have just a 12th class certificate. And with that kind of a resume, when his counterparts or his or her counterparts who have been pursuing education, graduation at that stage, he would be competing with them. And what this tour of duty or the Agnipath does to his resume, or what kind of transferable skills he brings to the corporate world, I don't think that there are going to be huge challenges in finding them opportunities.
Okay.
We'll possibly have very young, we'll be lowering the age bar of security sentries.
All right. Lowering the age bar of security services. Ajay Shukla, is that what a lot of people have said that do we want more security guards? Do we want our trained tank gunners to be becoming security guards in colonies, in banks and elsewhere after 4 years of service when they've defended their nation?
Oh, well, it's not really a question of security guards going in wasting the training that is given to them. Even now, the soldiers who retire at a certain point in time, they have to go and seek employment for the simple reason that they served for 15 years. It's not enough for them to go by for the rest of their lives, and they have to serve, they have to find some service. The aim of this entire exercise is really to reduce the manpower cost, and that is done not while they are in service, but when they retire from service without pension. While they are in service, they are getting approximately the same salary as a Javan who coming through the normal recruitment channels is getting. It's just that they go home after 4 years without pension. So we've all been saying for the last several years that manpower costs are way too high and they need to be reduced. But now when they've been reduced, same people are, including myself, are complaining about manpower costs and the fact that they are not suitably trained and so on. You have to get over all these obstacles. The simple fact is manpower has to be made cheaper.
All right. Anuma, would you like to respond to that? We face the number of people we have for the punch which our armed forces wield is perhaps too many. We need a leaner, meaner armed forces, more capability, look at wars all around us. And therefore, is this scheme not a good idea?
Good evening, Vishnu. I mean, is there any established data which suggests the same? Because I think they are experimenting with the armed forces a very wrong timing, because at one hand we have China, which has included us, not even moving 1 inch backward. Then Russia invading Ukraine is a plus for China, as Russia and China keep rubbing each other's back. Then we have a fragile economy of Pakistan and Sri Lanka on the other side. To deviate attention, they can always choose to play rogue. So this is not a good timing. And secondly, why experiment direct? Have a pilot project, have it with the police forces, replace the police with the home guard. Why don't you do that? Another thing is, I don't know, it occurs to me that there is a book called, it is published in 2009, Startup Nations, and that is about Israel. Israel has a population of just 7 million. Another is Singapore. These are the two things. Are we going to superimpose these things on a population of 1200 millions? I mean, there has to be a logic. Is it only to reduce the pension bill, or increasing any kind of combat effectiveness?
Yeah, in fact, there's no answer to that. And I wanted to go across to Brigadier Gupta for that. You know, sir, at this press conference, that's exactly what I asked the Defence Secretary. And then the Defence Minister chose to come on and say, no, we're not getting into that, any specific numbers of what the savings will be and whether that will translate into an increased capital, the capex, as it were. Whatever the armed forces require will be given to them. Now, that doesn't at all answer the question. We don't have enough money for capital, for capex, for new capability induction. That's presumably why this is being done. Shouldn't there be that statement that every year we will save X lakh crore rupees and that presumably this money will go towards new weapons procurements? Why is that data missing?
See, that was not the aim. The aim of this entire exercise is that the human resource management policy of the army over a period of time had many pitfalls. It needed a change. There was a requirement of doing away with that policy and coming with something new, because the problem being faced from day to day by the young leaders of today, we have had our times. As veterans, we have faced those, but now the challenges were different. Fratricide, desertions, asking for premature retirements, not willing to serve for long, getting injured, becoming casualties. There are so many things, modern day problems which are being faced by the human resource management were big challenges, and that required a radical change. And that is why I think this has been done. This has been done. A new human resource management policy is being put in place. Let's see what the effect of it is.
Okay.
Those who say that, this is without being done a thought, without it just being lumped upon the forces, I think it's not correct. This entire exercise has gone over a period of 2 years in the armed forces headquarters. Intense discussions have taken place. It has been on the public domain for last 6 months. A discussion has taken place. Inputs have been taken. Okay. And thereafter this policy has evolved. This policy will take time. And the best part of this policy is that the government has empowered the Raksha Mantri to carry out any changes midway, mid-course corrections as and when required, without going back to the government. So this is a big plus point to it.
Okay.
So government is also aware that this new policy may need some changes. That's why this empowerment has been given to the Raksha Mantri. So we should not just brush it away.
Okay. I just want to go back to Commander KP Sanjeev Kumar, because, I read a couple of tweets of yours, or one of your tweets, where you actually said that there was an attempt in the past, and you were part of that, to actually ensure that corporates pick up Indian Army officers post-retirement. And that seemed to have suggested that very few actually were hired. So is there a sense that, our people in uniform, once they end their service, will almost automatically be picked up by the corporate sector? Or is it more true that perhaps that's just what we would like to believe?
That's just what we would like to believe. And I was talking about officers, and I highlighted officers in the tweet.
Yeah.
Because we did a 6-month course in IIM Ahmedabad, the premier management institute in the country. And we had a mix of officers ranging from 26 years of age, short service commission, to 54, 56 years of age, the full spectrum, a motley group of 64 officers. We had to put in a lot of effort. The college had to put in a lot of effort. And it's not as if nobody got placed. Placement happens because of a variety of reasons. Sometimes the age works in favor of you, sometimes the age doesn't work in favor of you. But we had huge challenges in finding jobs for officers, right? And these were officers, 50% of whom were already on the way to drawing pension. And the rest half, there were worry lines on their face. Because if the short service commission officer at, let's say, 10 years of service or 12 years of service, last 2 years of service is very stressful for him or her. Because he or she is now at a stage where they are married or they have young kids, and if they don't get a job, they do not have much savings. It was really not the case that the corporates were beating down the doors of IIM Ahmedabad to hire us. We had to go and we had to write thousands and thousands of emails and approach people.
And what was your hit rate?
Hit rate was, in terms of jobs, I would say one job after 100 leads.
Wow, that's it.
So now compare that with a young sailor or an airman or a Jawan who leaves at 21 to 25 years of age. What does he have on his resume? Now, I just want to highlight that I understand that there is a brochure or a frequently asked questions brochure being handed out, and I've gone through it. I understand there are limitations how much information you can put in 4 pages, but nothing that is written in that brochure impresses me. There are a whole lot of, it's a word salad. You have made a lot of assumptions. You've basically made a lot of assumptions that this will happen, that will happen.
What is the biggest assumption that you believe has been made?
The biggest assumption is that this will improve the battle preparedness of the defense forces. How does it do that? You're replacing a time-tested recruitment procedure, process of the armed forces with a new thing. I was not unaware of this till the press conference. I was thinking that this would supplement the existing channel of recruitment. But here we are. It's done away with the existing model of recruitment. Now we are looking at recruiting people with a 75% attrition rate to start with. What kind of incentive is that for anybody to sign up for this? That we will soon come to know.
Okay, one sec, Commander. Ajay, would you like to come in on this? Battle preparedness, that's what the armed forces are ultimately all about. How can we believe that that's actually going to go up with this scheme?
Battle preparedness, the assumption about it going up is based on the fact that savings made in the pension budget would be translated into equipment under the modernization budget. If it turns out that they don't raise the modernization budget even after this thing, then that means that the whole exercise was a failure. But right now, it's very important to understand one thing. The salary structure is not going down. These Jawans who are recruited are being paid 30 to 40,000 rupees a month, which is approximately the same amount that Jawans recruited under the normal process are paid. The only time you are going to save money is when they retire and save on pension. So if you are saving on pension, you are able to buy equipment. You've achieved something as a result of it. But that remains to be seen. And the second big thing that needs to be seen is the same people who can't find jobs today, they find jobs 4 years down the line.
Okay. We've got a couple of questions from our young panel. The young lady in red on the top. Brigadier, half a sec, I'll just come to you. The young lady in the red shirt, would you like to go ahead with your question? Go ahead.
Thank you for the opportunity. I would like to ask that the Indian Armed Forces is not a mere profession but an emotion and involves secrecy in its function. How is this scheme, which is basically a short service commission, can justify the traditionalistic and culturistic ethics of the armed forces without negligible chance of scheme being misused?
Okay. Brigadier, would you like to take that? The ethics of the armed forces may be affected by soldiers joining for just 4 years.
Not at all. The ethics don't change like this. How are ethics built? Ethics, basically what is ethics?
Ethics are built over
unity,
time, sir.
Namak Nishan. So all these things are built over a period of time. You eat together, you sleep together, you train together, you live together, you fight together, you do exercises together. That's how this bonding and bonhomie comes. There's going to be no change in that. And as far as motivation is concerned, it's a function of command. It was there yesterday, it will be tomorrow. It is for the commanding officers to live up to the new challenges. So all this to say that it's going to affect the efficacy of the services, it's going to affect the morale, all this I don't agree. I have served for enough, 38 years in the army. I know how the army functions. And just take an example of an army unit, infantry unit. How many people are going to come to a unit? 30 in a year? What does that mean? A one platoon strength. Over a period of time, 4 platoons. What difference is going to make? So it is, and out of that 4 platoons, one section is going to be, the 75% is going to be retained and only 25% will go away. So it's the other way around.
The other way around.
75%. Yeah. So where is the change? It's not a drastic change at all. The point was being made is on pilot project. This is a pilot project, but this will give us what difference will make if 4 to 5 people are new in the entire unit of 800. So this is, should not make a big issue out of it. Let's analyze it properly and let's give it a chance.
All right.
The proof of the pudding lies in eating it.
Anuma, would you agree? Last word to you, Anuma. Go ahead.
Well, I would call it I know it all syndrome, because armed forces are not guinea pigs. And you've got to see that effective availability of this person for any specialized training is barely 2.5 years, because he will also be given leave, which will be 60 days minimum in an year, because others get 90 days. And from the beginning itself, he will have two kind of, you have seen the press release, isn't it so vague? It doesn't talk about, is it the only one scheme which is for induction, or the normal scheme for 15 years will also go on, or will it be only this 25% who will make to that 15%, 25% who will make it to the permanent thing? Are we not exposing that youth who is just 10th pass to an idea of rejection at such a young age? 75% will be rejected. When they go back to their villages, they will say, "Aa gaya, isko rakha nahi." Do you think what kind of impact
Vishnu, I will like to
on
say.
that youth? And he will be barely 10th pass,
Okay.
whereas all his counterparts would have gone.
All right.
It's not,
either to-
Commander, you've got 20 seconds. I'm out of time.
Vishnu,
Yes.
I want to say something.
Okay, as per the
It's
Vice
not
Chief,
rejection,
Vice Chief
it's
statement
rehabilitation.
today, 50%
Agniveer
after
will be prerequisite for all future requirements. All future recruitments, Agniveer will be a prerequisite. Note it. CAPF, police, state government jobs, Agniveer will be a prerequisite. Even in the corporate world it will be. And to say that they are being thrown away, that's totally wrong. Don't quote such language as you are an ex-officer. They are being brought, they are going to be cream at that age. 17.5 to 21 years, 4 years of service after that, and they say there is no skill. They'll serve in contingency areas, they'll serve in high altitude areas. What skill do they
All
need?
right, look,
That is where they develop
I'm out of
skills.
time.
Vishnu.
I'm totally out of time on this program. I do apologize, but this is something we'll keep following over and over again. You've been watching the big fight. It's called Agnipath. It's going to redefine the armed forces one way or the other. Will it work? That remains the big question.